Hello and welcome to this inaugural show of our LinkedIn Live series AI and Digital Trust, Future Proofing the Boards, where we'll talk about how corporations can future proof their boards and be ready for the AI revolution that is at our doorsteps. So today we'll be talking with Nicholas M. Donofrio, a visionary tech leader and champion of inclusive innovation. Nick shaped the future of technology during his remarkable 44-year journey at IBM, where he rose to Executive Vice President of Innovation and Technology. His other passionate work includes transforming the education landscape and opportunities for underrepresented groups in STEM fields. His exceptional leadership extends to national security contributions. In 2008, he made history as the first non government individual to receive the NNSA's Gold Medal for Distinguished Service, recognizing his pioneering work in high performance computing for managing the nation's nuclear stockpile and weapons systems. Today, as a highly sought after board member and advisor, Nick continues to influence the intersection of technology, innovation, and social impact. His leadership spans from cybersecurity pioneers like HYPR Corp to groundbreaking institutions like the New York Genome Institute. He serves as the chairman of Quantexa in London and was recently named a founding trustee for the USA National Semiconductor Technology Center. A recipient of multiple honorary doctorates and prestigious awards, including Industry Week's Technology Leader of the Year, Nick's recent autobiography, If Nothing Changes, Nothing Changes, published in 2022, encapsulates his philosophy of driving meaningful transformation. His insights on innovation, leadership, and creating inclusive technological advancement continue to shape conversations across industries. In recognition of his lifelong commitment to expanding opportunities in engineering, Nick was awarded the 2024 NACME Percy Peer Lifetime Achievement Award, a testament to his enduring impact on diversifying the technology sector. Join me and Khwaja Sheikh to hear his pearls of wisdom from a leader who has not only witnessed but actively shaped the evolution of technology and innovation over nearly 5 decades. Welcome, Nick.
That is a powerful introduction, Manoj. So thank you very much. Very kind and very generous. It's great being
Well, yeah, it doesn't do justice to the work you have done. Like, this is just amazing. We are just honored to have you here. To kick things off, like, can you help us, just get more familiar with your journey? 44 years, you have seen so many revolutions: mainframe, internet, smartphone, and now we are, at AI revolution. So, just spend a few minutes and tell us, how was that journey for you?
Yeah. So Manoj, I'm laughing as you're talking because I've actually been at it now for 60 years. I
Wow.
actually started in 1964. And you're rattling off the technologies but
Yeah,
there were so many technologies that you don't even know about
yeah, that's true. That's true. Yeah.
that we went through. And I was pretty good at a lot of them, like ferrite core memories and vacuum tubes and a lot of other things that we won't talk about. But they are demonstrative in this discussion because they kind of remind you how fast everything is moving.
Yeah.
So just in my 60 years, Manoj, in my 60 years alone, we're on a super exponential curve for the movement of technology, especially information technology, microprocessors, semiconductors, the whole full stack, that creates value. And that's not likely to stop. One way to look at this is what happened to the cost of a transaction per second over those 60 years. Actually, it went down, Manoj, by
Yeah.
almost 15 orders of magnitude.
Wow.
15 orders of magnitude in about 60 years. It's like, what? What else can you tell me that's been this productive?
Yeah.
So, having experienced that, 44 years in IBM, and then, of course, the last 16 years outside of IBM, it's been an incredible journey and reward for me. I'm an electrical engineer by education. I actually did honest work for a living at one time. I was truly a circuit, a chip, and a computer, and even a semiconductor process designer. So I got to experience all of that, as I grew up, inside IBM. And it became very obvious to me, Manoj, that the most important thing for me was to always worry about not just what I was doing, but what were the consequences of what I was doing. Did
Mm.
it really make sense? And what good was going to come from this, but what potential bad was going to come from
Yeah,
this.
yeah, yeah.
And then your point about diversity, I kept bothering myself with, why are the people in the room talking with me looking just like me? I mean, why
Yeah.
is it only people that look like me that I'm talking with? So they're missing something. We're missing talent. We're missing half the population if you think about, just the simple gender split. So, I would say to myself, this doesn't make any sense. We can't be as good as we think we are because we don't have everybody here participating in helping us solve the problem. That then led to my career, moving more towards the technology management and the innovation side of things, and did a lot of great work, on this topic of innovation for the Council on Competitiveness here in the United States. We helped put together the NII for them. You can actually still get that from their website. It's an insightful document that we put together back in 2003, 4, 5. So, I have kind of changed too, Manoj. You start out in one place, you think this is your life, and then you say, okay, here's the next challenge and the next challenge and the next challenge. And, I'm really not a computer designer, but, as you've hinted at, I was responsible for the IBM P series. We called it the RS-6000 when I developed it, with my team in Austin, Texas. And then I had to revamp the mainframe in IBM Poughkeepsie. I am not one of these people, right? I'm not in my core actually a code writer or a computer designer, but I'm smart enough to know the concepts, but I'm even smarter because I'm bright enough to know that I'll enable you to do the job.
Yeah.
Because I can't, or I'll enable Quasia to do the job because I can't do the job.
Yeah.
I know what job needs to be done, Manoj. I know what needs to be done. I just can't do it.
Yeah.
And that's part of the book as well. It's your ability to realize that. It's your ability to understand that you don't have to do everything to be able to direct people to do what's right, to be
Yeah.
able to kind of move them on a path where you're going to achieve your goals. You're going to all succeed. I used to say this, I still say this all the time, for a leader, and I view myself now more as a leader. The job is made up of three things. It's made up of inspiration, aspiration, and perspiration. You start with aspiration. You have to aspire to something. That's maybe 1% of the job. Then you have to inspire people to do it. Maybe that's 3 or 4% of the job. 96% of the job is perspiration. It's just hard work.
Yeah.
You have to be willing to perspire right along with the people that you're trying to inspire, to move to that aspirational view. So you have to have the courage of your convictions, Manoj, in order to make a difference here. And people need to believe that of you. And if they can believe that of you, especially technical people, they're with you. They'll follow you. They'll work with you. They'll make it happen. And I have been blessed, whether it's inside the IBM company for 44 years or the other companies I've worked with, AMD, I was on their board, Delphi Automotive, now Aptiv was on their board. They followed the same paths, Manoj. They listen to that aspirational, inspirational view. And as long as you're perspiring with them, they're going to perspire with you. And we made history together. All I did was enable people. That's all I can do right now is enable people to be their best, to do their best, and to deliver that value. Does that make sense to you?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, fascinating story, Nick. It's very inspirational. On the LinkedIn audience, we have a diverse audience, both the CEOs, board directors, aspiring board directors, as well as developers, as well as the architects, as well as the change agents, etc. And you started with your technical career, and we often see technical members lack emotional intelligence. And in your story, you were able to build that emotional intelligence muscle so that you can rally the troops from everybody from IBM towards that common purpose. And same thing applies to the corporate boards. The psychological safety is very important, where when the uh, everybody's feedback is very important to make sure we make the right decision. Maybe for the audience on the LinkedIn, if you can give us one or two tips on how to build that emotional intelligence, that soft skill. That soft skill is the hard stuff, but in your story, you were able to build those skills. Maybe one or two tips you can give for our audience.
Yeah, sure. That's a great point. I mean, emotional is easy for me. I'm Italian, so we get it very, very easily. So, that's not what you're talking. Although I think that's important, by the way, in a leader. I think it's very important if you're looking to be true, and we are looking for truth and trust. People want to know that that you feel the way they feel, that you cry when they cry, that you laugh when they laugh. There's nothing wrong with that as a leader. Expressing your emotions is very important. I mean, in some sense, it validates who you are to people. But the point you're pushing towards is, I learned the hard way, Kwaja, to be honest with you. In the book, I talk about a story when I became a first manager, first management job, in IBM. I worked with the people I used to be in their department. I mean, we worked together. We were developing chips together. We were just having so much fun. Everything was changing. And then IBM makes me the manager of that group. And then we have to move from New York. We have to move up to Burlington, Vermont, right? So we stayed friends. But I was the worst manager ever. I mean, I could do all their jobs. I knew all of their jobs because I did all of their jobs. And when it came time for the morale survey or the opinion survey or whatever you want to call it, in the parlance of today, mine was terrible. It was so bad. I told my wife, don't unpack all those boxes because they're likely to fire me when they find out how bad a manager I am. And you're supposed to then go into these meetings and try to solicit feedback and figure out what the problems are and do a better job next time. I went into my feedback meeting with the department and I just said to them, I have no idea whether IBM is going to allow me to remain in the company, let alone remain your manager, let alone whether you want me to be your manager any further. But I'm telling you right now, I got the message. I'm telling you right now, I am now going to be your enabler. I am no longer going to try to do your job. I am no longer going to tell you how to do your job. I am going to listen better. I am going to learn from you. And you are going to teach me what is important to you. And with your permission, with IBM's permission, I promise you, I will become your enabler. I will find out what you need. You will tell me. We will work on trying to find a way to get it. But from here on in, I am going to be your enabler in chief. That single disaster early in my career made a difference for me. It became who I am. It became what followed me. It became everything I did from there on in. And maybe to your point earlier, maybe that became the enabler for me to realize, you know what? You don't have to be able to do it to be able to direct it or to lead it or to understand it or appreciate it or enable it. But you do have to be able to understand it and let people know that you can't do it anymore and that you're not going to do it anymore, even if you could do it anymore. That was the most important element of my emotional intelligence quotient, to be honest with you, is the realization that as a leader, you are the enabler in chief.
Yeah.
You're not the teller in chief. You're not the doer in chief. You are the enabler in chief. Does that make
That's
sense?
fantastic. Yeah, yeah. So I have a question about now the future related to this. Like, as you go higher up in the chain, like you become a board member, board director, you have accomplished so much. But from what you are describing, it takes a lot of humility. It takes a lot of letting go of control and trust of the people. How do you foster that in the boardroom for other leaders that are emerging who are working under you, because it's only going to work if you continue to cultivate that in other people as well, right?
It's very true, Manoj. So a couple of good examples would be, Delphi Automotive Aptiv. There's a Harvard business case study written about this. So a lot of things I'm going to tell you, you will see there. AMD is another one. There's also a Harvard business case study, written about this. So the method I chose to use, Manoj, was at the board level. Let's create an innovation and technology committee. Let's have a different perspective, since our companies, whether it was Delphi Automotive, now Aptiv, or AMD, they're technology companies. So let's have an innovation and technology company. Let's listen carefully to what the problems are. Let's listen carefully to what people are doing. Let's try to understand, are they enabled? They can want to do something, but are they enabled to do it? And what more do they need from me? Those two moves on my part to create those committees, along with others, honestly saved those companies, just to be blunt with you. I mean, that's what the Harvard Business Study will tell you. We found our way. Delphi was a perennially bankrupt company inside GM. Remember when GM went bankrupt, Delphi was spun out. It was bought by private equity, and then I joined their board. And with Jack Kroll, God bless him, we together formed the Innovation and Technology Committee. And to this day, it's still there at Aptiv. I mean, I retired from the Aptiv board a few years ago. It's still there. Same thing at AMD. When I joined AMD, I said, this doesn't make any sense to me. I think we are going to have to do things a lot differently. So let's put an Innovation and Technology Committee along with Bruce Claflin, who was then the chair. We did that, and it's still there at AMD. They still have an Innovation and Technology Committee. So, Manoj, even as a board member, without running the company, because you don't run the company, you can have great influence. That becomes the enabler. So they come to you with their problems. They say, oh, yeah, we'd like to do that, but we can't do this. If we can't do that, then we can't do this. So who's going to know that, Manoj, if you're not going to know it, to be able to enable it, to get things done? And in both cases, I have to say this to you, the CEOs of those two companies loved it. They love the Innovation and Technology Committee board. They learned. I mean, can you imagine, the CEOs learning as fast as you're learning, and therefore everybody can move at lightning speed, and you can enable a lot of change a lot quicker. That's, I think, how you do it. You don't have to know it. Nobody's saying you have to do the work, but you have to become that enabler, and you have to provide a platform, an opportunity. You have to provide a technique or an approach where people can let you know what's wrong, what's on their mind, and then you can help them determine the path forward to fix it.
Nick, fascinating insights. This is very timely. The National Association of Corporate Directors, NACD, came up with 7 recommendations for the technology leadership on the boardroom. They indicated data oversight as one among them, and I would add AI oversight also in that list. Now, from your experience, as you see, there's a lot of silos between leadership, between the management and the board. How do we eliminate those silos when it comes to artificial intelligence, when AI impacts all parts of the business? How do you structure that decision making authority between the management and the board when it comes to AI?
Yeah. So look, number one, I hear you about AI. I hear you about data. Um, 60 years ago, we'd have been talking about something different. 20 years ago, 10 years ago, 5 years ago. So you should substitute that for technology because you don't know what's coming. You don't know the differences that are going to happen. You sit here right now, and I'm not saying this is you or any of us, but we sit here right now when we pontificate about AI and data and quantum as if this is the end of the road. It's not the end of the road. So you have to be thinking about these in the context of managing technology writ large. You break those silos down by understanding how they were built in the first place. You understand why they are silos. You understand what happened. They didn't start out that way. They were probably more like this, and then they went like this because somebody put pressure on them to deliver individually, and that's how a silo gets formed. As opposed to no, come on, it all works like this, right? It's all integrated. It all is interconnected. So I think in general, technology is pervasive. It eventually finds its way across everything. It has. I mean, I'm old enough to remember, things were still being electrified. We were still making, we're still making electrical decisions. We still are making electrical decisions, by the way. It's just a different kind of electrification.
Yeah.
We still are doing that, right? So you think a little deeper about what is really happened and what is really going to happen. And all of a sudden you start to realize the more you bring things together, the more you integrate things, the better the solutions are, the faster the solutions are. But unless you're starting with the problem, and unless it's a common problem, you are never going to integrate silos. If every silo has its own problem, then too bad. I mean, you're not going to integrate them because they're going to say, well, I'm in this silo. I'm supposed to be solving this problem. You're in that silo. You're supposed to be solving that problem. So think about what you're doing, because when you do it, either at the CEO level or at the board level, you're suffering consequences. There are going to be consequences for your actions. Most startups, as you know, both of you, they're highly integrated. They can't afford silos. They have to be able to move quickly from one side to the other. It's only when you're starting to protect things or when you're trying to grind out, better performance from people. And, there are ways and methodologies to do this, but, forcing them to solve individual problems is how you get individual silos.
That's amazing. Yeah, and I think you referred to something that Khwaja you talk about a lot, which is like breadth of the skill and the depth of the skills, right? And I think naturally as companies grow, complexity grows, people go deep, 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 and they forget the breadth of the skill. So again, bringing back the conversation to the boards and the board members, like. Do you think, in your opinion, people have enough of these T-shaped skills where they have the breadth, they have the depth, and they are able to, sort of recognize these? Because, let's face it, like sometimes it's not even clear where the silo exists and where the boundary is, right? So what is your view on the current state of that?
So, Manoj, it's a really good point. So number one, I'm an advocate of what's called the T-shaped education model, not the I-shaped model. Most of us are I's. Yeah. All of us should become T's. So, you have to become as broad as you are deep. And the education system tends to, the higher up your degree is, the less you know about everything. The more you know about a few things. Yeah. So, we have to kind of flip that around. And board members should be more T-shaped. They should be broad, as well as have some form of a bona fide, some form of a knowledge base that they call home, but they have to be life.
Oh, seems like Nick's connection dropped. So
Right.
Let's wait for him to rejoin. But yeah, Khwaja, why don't you speak about it? Because this is your favorite topic as well, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
I lost you there. I'm sorry. I'm not sure what happened. Am I back?
Yeah, you are back. We can hear you. Not yet see you, but
Okay, I'll just start my camera. There,
yeah,
there.
yeah,
You go. Okay,
yeah.
sorry about that. I'm not sure what happened.
No
Uh,
worries.
somebody didn't like what I was saying, obviously. So, Manoj, I think as a board member, you have to keep asking yourself simple questions like, what does this enterprise that I'm the board member of, what does it do? How does it create value?
Hmm.
And if you can't answer that question, I mean, it might take you a year, but if you can't answer that question, ultimately, you should not be on that board. You have to understand deeply, how does this enterprise create value? How does it make money? Or how does it save lives? Or how does it educate people? Or how does it govern people? You know, if you can't do that as a board member and say it to yourself and say it in public and say it to everybody else, you shouldn't be there. You should leave, because you're going to be in trouble sooner than you know it. And I've gone through some of these, right? Some of these tough things, like when I was on the Bank of New York board, right? I'm a technologist. You know, our regulators would say, "And you're here. What are you here for? You know, what are you a banker? You know, what banking?" I said, "No, I'm a technologist." And they'd say, "Well, why are you here?" I used to chair the risk committee for the Bank of New York. And it
Wow.
was like, what? You? So I would say to them, "Do you actually know how the bank works? Do you
Mhm.
actually know what banking means? Do you understand the technology associated with banking? You know, we don't actually drive trucks around with gold in it, you know, and
Yeah.
move it from one. Well, we do some of that, but that is not what a bank does. But, you know, this is the problem. If you don't know how the enterprise works, you can't defend it, you can't
Mhm.
defend yourself, and you can't improve it. I remember when I joined the Delphi board, now active, um, myself and one other guy, we kind of went on a world tour. We wanted to see whatever it was doing. You know, like, can we see what it does? Can we, you know, you want us to opine on what it does? We need to know what it does. We
Yeah.
went to several different, you know, facilities. It became obvious to me that, you know, this company needed to pivot. It needed to pivot away from gas and oil. It needed to pivot to the continuous electrification of the automotive platform. You know, independent of how the wheels turn, the autos of today, those platforms are electrified. They're getting more electrified. You know, you see all this stuff. I mean, you got more stuff in your car if you buy a brand new, you know, leading edge car than you probably have had in your entire life in your house or
Yeah.
in your possession. And there's going to be more.
Yeah.
So how do you know that, Manoj, if you don't actually engage and see and say, look at that, you know, do we really want to do this anymore? Is this really a market you should be in? Is this what you mean? You know, AMD the same way, you know, like, really, is this what you want to do? I don't know, you know, seems to me like this is the wrong market for AMD. Seems to me we should be over here doing that. Why can't you do this? What do you mean you can't do it? I don't want to hear that. You know, don't we have smart people? Don't you have engineers here? Let me talk to the engineers. Let me find out what's stopping them from doing what needs to be done. Honestly, you engage like that, and there is permission that you need. You need to do that along side by side with the CEO. You know, and you should know this, Manoj. I am not a favor of this old phrase that a lot of people use, like nose in, fingers out. That ain't
Mhm.
me. I'm sorry. You don't want me on your board. If
Hmm.
that's the rule you're using, you don't, I'm not going to run your company for you, but I am going to know enough about your company to be able to have a discussion with you, if you're the leader, about what's right and what's wrong. And this idea of going along to get along, and that's another BRC we did, Quadja, at the NACD. That's garbage in my mind. You're not there for a mutual admiration society. That's
Yeah.
not what you're there for. You're there to understand, to protect, and enhance value. whatever that value is. You're there to understand the risks associated with that, to mitigate those risks, and to absolutely do everything you can to increase that value for all shareholders. If you can't sign up to do that, then you shouldn't be on the board. You should leave.
Yeah, well said, Nick. I think the more I learn your wisdom is more or less like a scripture. It is so sweet that I want to get more and more of your wisdom. Thank you for sharing your precious time with us. And your book, If Nothing Changes, Nothing Changes, is valuable, remarkable, and illuminating. And for all the LinkedIn audience here, if you can get this book, it will change your life, both at the corporate life as well as your home life, as well as your life in the community. I would say it is a must read. And uh, reflecting on this book, you mentioned two different case studies. One was related to a Russian employee anti-money laundering case where the Department of Justice was investigating Bank of New York. Another case study related to the the entire bank was out of business because of 9/11 crisis. Maybe if you can peel an onion and how the board oversight principles helped you to recover
Sure.
from the crisis, as some say, never waste a crisis.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. Never waste a crisis. It's hard enough to change, and clearly crises give you the impetus to change. So those two issues you're talking about, they're actually covered in the book. Tom Rennie was the CEO and chairman at that time. So yeah, there was a very difficult Russian money laundering issue. The Russians were faking everything. They were spoofing everything. They were blaming everything on the chairman and the CEO, Tom Rennie. So in New York State, publicly traded companies are allowed to appoint. It's kind of like a judicial committee out of the board. And so I was brand new to the board. This is kind of powerful, right? Here I am, a brand new director, and I'm put on this judicial review committee. Only two of us, because only two of us were free of this incident. So we weren't there at that time. So we became bona fide. Civiletti became our lawyer. He worked with us. I think he was the attorney general for Jimmy Carter. And it was a tough time, as Tom, by the way, the book itself has about 38 other people in it. So to Kwaj's point, they're telling stories and I'm telling stories right along with them. And we're commenting on each other's remarks in the book. We ground it out. We had to interview Tom. We had to listen to all of the garbage that was being generated. And it was really bad stuff that they were generating. You talk about lying, you talk about spoofing, you talk about, making up junk. That's what the Russians were doing to try to hang Tom Rennie. So only two of us, I was the chair of the committee. We listened, we got through it. Civil They guided us. We put our report together. We handed it over to the judge in New York State to hear the case, and we won. We won our case. We proved our point that it was all made up. It was just dastardly stuff. If you think it's bad now, it was horrible then. They were just lying through their eye teeth, making up all kinds of phony stories, getting people to swear that that he was doing these things. So they just got everybody to lie. And by the way, to your point, it was immersed in a shareholder suit. So what they were trying to do was to extract even more money from the bank. We won.
Now, on that one, how were you able to build a trust between the CEO and as a new board director? The CEO would have had a lot of courage in trusting you, that you were able to keep the reputation of the company when his role itself is at stake with all the investigation.
It's a good question. I think I was barely 40 years old when this happened. Tom himself, just to be candid with you, had a lot of faith in IBM. He actually asked IBM he was smart enough to know this bank is really a big IT company. We need somebody from IBM on our board. And as I recall so vividly, he went to Lou Gerstner and asked Lou, could you give me someone? Could you give me someone to put on the IBM board or put on our board from IBM? And Lou said, yeah, I mean, the guy you probably want is Nick. And the only problem is Nick's entertaining another board spot at the same time. And we're only going to let Nick sit on one board while he works here. So they hustled, came after me. And I met with Tom and Gerald Hassel. And I mean, given the history of the bank, I mean, it's one of the first banks in the country. It's almost 250 years old. Alexander Hamilton founded the Bank of New York, for goodness sake. Mm-hmm. Its history is like, boy, if you're going to do anything for the country, you got to do this. So, Tom sought me out. Tom understood who I was. He knew what my strengths were. I'm not good at just sitting there looking at pages and pages and pages of numbers. I mean, that's not, you're looking for me to find the mistake, the 20-cent mistake you made. Don't do that with me, and he was smart enough to understand that. And by the way, the Bank of New York was one of the first financial institutions to actually create a separate risk committee from the audit committee. Originally, I was a member of the audit committee and we did audit and risk together. But Tom understood me. He understood, I got to pull this apart. The risks are one thing, audit's another. So Nick, you come over here, you become the chair of the risk committee, and then we'll leave the audit over here. And then the way he worked that very cleverly. So me, the chair of risk, the chair of audit, we were on each other's committee. So he had the two chairs on each other's committee to kind of make sure that they stayed connected and that we weren't, duplicating each other's work or missing something that was important to the regulator. And he had to convince the regulators that this was a good idea. And of course, it was a good idea. He did it. So you say, how do you build that trust? I mean, it's like, number one, he didn't have a choice, to be honest with you. But, I was his chosen person. I didn't go look for him. I was actually going to a different bank. And he stopped me from going to a different bank and made me come to the Bank of New York. So, he had some confidence in me, I guess, is what I would say. And that was never really an issue. He trusted my judgment. And the other person who was on the committee with me as well, he trusted my judgment. And we didn't let him down. And, we learned a lot from Civiletti. He was an amazing counsel for us. We read stacks and stacks and stacks of testimonies and papers, and, he would guide us and, don't forget to look at this. Don't forget to look at that. Don't forget to consider this. So, I can't say enough about the resources that the bank gave us, all the resources we need to get the job done. And then the second point you brought up was September 11th, which was a horribly difficult and disastrous time, specifically for all of us in this country, but in particular, the Bank of New York. No one knew this, and actually I was on my way to a bank board meeting that morning at, 1 Wall Street, which is where the bank was.
Wow.
And its data center was in the Barclay building, very close to Twin Towers. No one knew this, but when those Twin Towers went down, underneath the Twin Towers were all the telecommunication systems out of New York. So the bank had twin tails. The bank had two paths out. The problem is nobody knew that the two paths ended up under the Twin Towers. And when the Twin Towers went down, the bank was shut down. Shut down. I mean, the Federal Reserve could not operate without the Bank of New York Mellon, or Bank of New York now. I guess it's changed its name just back to the Bank of New York. Couldn't operate without it. And Tom, I talked to Tom. I said, well, we got to get you out of here. Where are the duplicates for everything? Where's the redundancy for everything? IBM, our company, Quasia, stepped up, gave the bank all the assets it needed. We rebuilt a data center in 3 days. in a different part, a different state, a different place in the state, brought the bank up so that the Federal Reserve could go back to work. We could open and close the Federal Reserve and get the bank back on its feet and then rebuild the bank over time. But if IBM hadn't stepped in and stepped up, I don't know. I don't know what to say, right? There was very little choice, but for IBM to do this, to bring the bank back alive again in a very, very short period of time. And, in some sense, Tom trusted me, like, we won't let you down. We had to write reports. It is a regulated industry. We had to write lots of reports about what happened. Why did it happen? We had to be critical of some things, to be blunt with you, like that twin communication, two different carriers too, by the way. So it's not like it was only one carrier that went out in two directions. It was two different carriers. So we helped the bank. But this is what I'm saying, Kwaja, about you're either in it or you're not. I mean, do you know how the bank works or don't you? I mean, do you understand what it does for a living? Do you understand how important it is? Do you understand how it gets its job done? How does it create value? If you're not that way, you shouldn't be there. You shouldn't be doing this stuff. You should be doing this work. There's a lot of other people who can find the 20 cents that's missing, in the spreadsheet, other than me. I'm more about how does this thing really work, and how do we keep it working? How do we make it better? How do we streamline it? How do we become responsive? And now we're talking about AI and digital trust. I mean, banks are all about digital trust, for goodness sakes, right? I mean, it's what it's all about. We're not swapping real gold around. How do you know when you charge this thing, somebody's going to pay for it over there? I mean, you talk about digital trust. Okay. I mean, we've been at this for a long time on digital trust. There are ways to proof it. There are ways to understand when you're being spoofed. There are ways to understand all these things. We got to do a better job of educating people. And that's constantly what I did. I had to educate the regulators. I mean, they would torture me on a regular basis. Like, again, why are you here? I'd go to these, super regulator meetings, and it would be like, what's this guy? I mean, what do you know about banking? And I'd just simply turn around and say, what do you know about banking? Do you actually know how it works? Do you actually know what's being transferred? Do you actually know what technology is being deployed? They had no clue. They had no clue. We'd get into fights over, I don't know if you remember these, I forget there was a name for them, but there were these transactions where you could actually do the transaction and get your money before the transaction got filed. They were like super fast. You get like a T1 or a T5 line maybe, and you could actually do the transaction, get your money back, and then default the transaction. And they'd say, no, you can't do that. And I'd say, oh yeah, you can. Yeah, that's very possible, by the way. Well, no, you can't do that. Yeah, I'm telling you, you can do that. You got to get serious about the fact that if you're not keeping up with technology, every bad person in the world is going to use it to run over the top of you.
And it is actually happening. The recent incident with the JP Morgan Chase, where someone was withdrew a lot of money, and now JP Morgan is filing.
Oh, I saw that. Yeah, I just read that. Yeah, it reminded me of that, of these super fast transactions. High speed transactions. Like, how did you let that happen? And now you got to go explain everything, and regulators are regulators. They want to have everything explained to them. So, I mean, that's another point I should raise. I mean, you have to be able to simplify everything. You have to be able to explain it to people who don't understand it. And simply, this is why you need to worry about this. This is what could. Oh, really? That could happen? Do you think so? I remember. And maybe I'm not supposed to say this, but I remember spending time with the Federal Reserve. This was quite a while ago, educating them on cybersecurity. It was like, huh? What's that about? Wait, we need cybersecurity? What does that mean? So let me explain to you how, not only what it means, let me explain to you how you could, if you were a bad person, how you could use it to your advantage to compromise situations. So education is always important. That is something you can never, ever do enough of. And simplifying these complex situations is terribly important for everyone. Simplify, simplify, simplify. Not everybody needs to understand how everything works. You know,
Yeah.
they don't need all the details. They need to understand if you do this, that happens. If you do that, this happens. And here's why it happens. And that's all you have to be able to understand. That makes sense?
Absolutely. Now, before I go, I'm really excited for the audience to see that medal that you got for the nuclear pile. And
Uh,
then I have a follow up question with the statement that you made that pretty much every company is now like a giant IT company. Technology infused in whether it's a bank, whether you're selling shoes, whether you are, hair care products, whatever it is. So why don't you show us the medal and tell us like how people can recognize how technology is driving the world today?
well, here's the medal
Amazing.
from
So
the
what's the story behind
NSA.
that?
So this medal was given to me for the work we did as we managed the nuclear stockpile through the ASCII program. The NNSA is part of the Department of Energy. It's the National Nuclear Security Agency. They're responsible for the stockpile. So we simulated the entire stockpile. We gave them the compute. We didn't do the simulation work. Livermore, Los Alamos, all the wonderful, incredibly bright and talented engineering labs. Department of Energy's engineering labs. So many of them in Chicago, Oak Ridge, Los Alamos, as I said, Livermore, Pacific Northwest. They're just everywhere, Utah. So we worked with them all to give them all the computers they needed because the theory of their case was we could actually, and this actually, the credit here should go to a young man, he's a little older than me, Vic Reese. I mean, he put his life into this for the Department of Energy, and he was my partner. We hooked up. I believed him. He believed me. And we competed. We competed against HP. We competed against Cray. We competed against Digital and Sun. We competed. But in the end, we were the dominant mover for the Department of Energy to give them what they needed to simulate the stockpile. And they did. I mean, we simulate the nuclear stockpile better than if we were testing weapons by blowing them up. So we signed the Nuclear Test Ban Treaty, nuclear nonproliferation. All of those things are now managed by models inside a computer. And it's so interesting to see the scientists who argued with me, they couldn't do it, now telling me all they can do. It's like, you got to be kidding me. How could we ever live without this? Why we would never want to blow up another bomb as long as we live, because we understand this much better, Nick, than we ever thought. And they used to show me these things, and they'd say, look at that over there, Nick. You see that? We thought that was the result of something, and it's actually the beginning of something. So we had the theory wrong. We would have never figured that out on our own, Nick. I used to have to go to Washington with Vic Reese, and God bless Harold Brown. I mean, he was the Secretary of Defense, and he was also on the IBM board. So they put me into this. And we used to have to go report to him, convince him, we're making progress, sir. We're making progress. This person's still a holdout. That person's still a holdout. But I mean, you can argue that you do or don't like nuclear weapons. I'm not trying to argue that. All I'm saying is the physics is so well understood now as a model. And by the way, some of that physics was used to prove fusion, prove fusion. The same people, Livermore, that proved fusion used a lot of those very same models. So, this means a lot to me because we, the IBM company, me, my own personal reputation, we put ourselves on the line, and we got it done. We got it done for the country. And as a result of that, we were able to show people, you can do a lot more. Look at the genome structure now. Look at all of the work that's going on in life sciences. Tons of modeling and simulation there. Tons of modeling and simulation. Got to do even more there, right? I was just on a New York Genome Center board this morning. Every time you talk to these people, it's like, holy mackerel, it's getting better by the minute. You're getting closer to the answer every day, about why you're you and why I'm me and why do I behave this way and why do you behave that way and why does my liver look like this and your liver looks like that. And, all that stuff is going to be knowable. All the stuff that's known will be knowable in the next few years because of technology. So there's a lot to be said about where we are. And I said it's that super exponential curve. And no matter how far up it you think you are, you're not. It's got a long, 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 long way to go. And technology, if done correctly, put in the hands of the right people, monitored, guided, can be your friend. It can be your aid. It can be your salvation, just as it's always been. It has problems. You have to deal with those problems. You have to be able to recognize them. You have to understand the consequences of your actions. And believe me, there are always consequences. Don't fool yourself. But you have to recognize those risks, recognize those consequences, and deal with them openly and in a forthright manner. So, I mean, that's where I think life is right now. And I think that's where this metal is just, it's a step along the way. It's an indicator on the way to success. Life science as well as physical science, both.
Yeah,
We have 5 minutes, so last question.
This is fascinating, Nick. I counsel board chairs and lead directors to balance both the short-term objectives and long-term objectives, and especially you having served on the IBM as a senior executive as well as on AMD, you have seen technology transformation from multiple angles. And Daryl Plummer at Gartner IT Symposium a few weeks ago mentioned mainframe computing is one of the 7 most disruptive technologies with the highest impact that has given to the world. And of course, you are the father of the mainframe computing. Now, from your perspective, how do you compare and contrast the impact of mainframe computing technology with today's artificial intelligence, both from the operational risk and the governance standpoint?
So look, I think it's an interesting comparison. So again, you have to remember what you're trying to do, what problem you're trying to solve. What are you focused on? Why are we doing this? In the case of IBM System 360 mainframe, it's 60 years old this year, 60. It runs the first line of code that was ever written on it, unaltered and unrecompiled, on the brand new mainframe you can get out of IBM today, which they call their Z system. Can you give me another system that's compatible with itself? For 60 years? Not a chance. Does it have to be that way? So, I mean, part of what you're poking at is why is it the way it is? You have every right to ask that question. It's that way because we want it to be that way, or because we don't want it to be that way. That's the question you have to ask yourself as a board member, as a CEO, as a leader. You make this stuff up and then you live with it for the rest of your life, for goodness sakes. So AI, I mean, do you really think it's new? It's been around for it's almost been around as long as I've been around, in the industry. So why is it now? Why is its time now? Its time is now because it's democratized. It's accessible. We've kind of taken it out of the hands of the druids, the high priest and priestesses. It's now in the hands of us mere mortals. To do what? You could argue, by the way, that was also true of the internet. They put it in our hands to do what? What are you doing with it? Playing games with it? What are you doing with it? What is AI really doing for you? I mean, so what are you now reading about AI? You're reading, okay, maybe large language models is not such a good idea. Maybe I don't get enough productivity out of that. Maybe I'm burning too much energy to do that. Maybe I'm wasting too much resource doing that. What about something that's more industry focused, that's more problem focused? Are they the better approach to things? How are you validating those models? How are you validating the data? Synthetic data. Does anybody know what the hell synthetic data is besides me? People make up data every day and sell it to you, thinking it's the real stuff. I mean, do you know how that works? do you know what you're looking at? Because to make AI work, you need an equation, you need some kind of governance, you need data, you need a problem. I mean, that's all it is kind of just automating what we've always been doing. How do you know that it's being done the right way? We didn't talk about this, but I did serve on the state of Connecticut's special committee where we looked into AI and AI regulations last year, and they're still debating what they're going to do here in Connecticut. So I co-chaired that committee with Senator Maroney from the state of Connecticut. So, I mean, I don't want people feeling frightened by this. I don't want you to become overwhelmed or awed by this. I mean, quantum could scare the living daylights out of you if you let it. Don't do that. Quantum has a certain specific set of problems it works for, problems it doesn't work for. Simplify. Only, don't get yourself so worked up that, it's beyond me. There is a way to learn everything. I'm encouraging people right now to write these Macaulay books, like How Does That Work? I don't know if you've ever seen one of those kid books. Macaulay writes these kid books, like How Does This Work? We should be writing kid books. This is how does AI work? How does a semiconductor work? How does a microprocessor work? How does a quantum computer work? Let's write it down simply so that you're not frightened by it, but you understand it. And then you can decide how it applies to either your business or the business that you're governing, if you're a board member, or the business that you're running, if you are a CEO or a senior executive. Please don't turn, don't turn away from this stuff. Don't turn a deaf ear to this stuff. It's going to be there whether you like it or not, and you're going to have to deal with it whether you like it or not. And you said it well, Manoj. It's everywhere. It is everywhere. And you better act like it's everywhere. And there's ways for you to learn. Just be that lifelong learner. You don't have to do it to know it and to understand it.
Absolutely. This has been such a fascinating conversation. So much wisdom, so many nuggets that you shared. I think everybody should listen to it and implement it in their company, boards, everywhere. So thank you so much for being with us. Now, before we let you go, can you tell us, if people want to get in touch with you, what is the best way to do that?
Well, I'm on LinkedIn, number one. You can certainly go there to get to me. I'll give you my personal email address if you'd like. You can also do that. So that's nmd1@ymail.com. nmd1@ymail.com.
Awesome. And Khwaja, please, any closing remarks from you?
Yeah. Thank you, Nick, for joining this session. And again, I strongly recommend all the LinkedIn audience here get this book. You can learn so much. Actually, I keep this book on my desk here, where every day I read it. As I said, this is more or less like a scriptures. And the more you read it, it's so sweet that you want to learn more and more and more, and then you can really reflect. This book is really addressing you, so that you can really implement that on your day-to-day life. And we'll also put you on the show notes, the NACD's Blue Ribbon Commission on the Technology Leadership, as well as some of the innovations that are happening around the world in terms of AI and digital trust. And again, thank you, Nick, for making this day blissful. And Manoj, thank you for making this interaction more meaningful by asking your thought-provoking questions. Are always illuminating.
Thank you all. Thank you.
All the best to all of you. Be well, be safe, and be nice. And if you're in America, vote. Thank you.